I'm here with Satah Cameron, the musician known as People You Meet Outside of Bars. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's been a pleasant and busy afternoon so far, and I've written down one question that I would like to ask right away. That being, what is your favorite rude word?
Rude word?
Yeah, like
Oh,
profanity.
I guess I say shit a lot. Um, so it might be up there. But I think I make pretty liberal use of all of the big ones.
Okay.
I'd say sometimes to my detriment. I have occasionally listened back to recordings that I've made, like when I'm recording music, and the amount that I swear at myself when something goes wrong has been
Mhm.
shocking occasionally.
Are you a big fan of Gordon Ramsay, the world famous chef, and you know,
You
bit of
know,
a potty mouth?
I'm a little too sensitive to watch a lot of his programs just because I can't handle people being yelled at.
Right.
But I think we have sort of a maybe a similar vocal affectation occasionally. I just
Hmm.
usually I wouldn't direct it at other people probably as much as he would. Um, I am a huge fan of whenever he interacts with children because
Hmm.
he gets very sweet and supportive,
Oh
which I
yeah.
do love to see.
Oh yeah. I think I remember back in when I was an adolescent, I used to watch that show MasterChef Kids a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
I think there's a Hell's Kitchen version for kids as well, right?
Really? I have never seen that. But I love the idea. I think most most shows should just have a kids equivalent because I would watch that and I would have a lot of fun.
Hmm. Let's see. Um, do you remember the first time you hear profanity when you listen to music? Like, yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I do. I mean, I listened to the radio a lot and I grew up listening to sort of the radio and my dad's CDs, and I'm trying to sort through and think of any of those would have had profanity in them. Um Maybe in a Queen song, if Queen ever
Hmm.
swore, I probably heard that, but I can't think of anything that pops right to mind.
Hmm.
I do have a playlist somewhere though. I'm not going to be able to recall most of it off the top of my head. I have a playlist that just has what I find to be particularly effective uses of the F word,
Hmm.
like that really use it to its full potential and sort of get a good emotional impact out of that. Because I love, there's something really appealing to me about lyricism that dips into something like profane and sort of like what people would describe as like easy or like you should be able to write your way around swearing. So I
Hmm.
think it's really effective when a song like uses profanity really well to just be like, yeah, this is how much this sucks. I'm gonna swear now. I love that.
Yeah, I remember when I was probably 10 or 11, Eminem was putting out some of his most popular songs.
Sure.
And of course, when it played on the radio, of course, they censored off his profanity, which it's very odd and it takes away from the experience because, of
Totally.
course, he swears a lot. So I managed to find the explicit version of say his 2010 album Recovery,
Okay.
which has I think some of my favorite Eminem songs are on there. Not Afraid and Love the Way You Lie and No Love featuring Lil Wayne.
Sure.
And I remember being really, I guess, really into hip hop when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's basically where I learned many, if not all, of the swear words.
I've just this your story made me think of three separate stories. I
Yeah.
can think I can do very quickly two of
Oh, I
them.
love stories.
One is I remember being maybe grade 5 or 6. I don't remember who the artist was. There was this song where the chorus went, "I'm a dick, I'm addicted to you." I was at a school dance and this was long enough ago that they had to play music off of CDs manually and somebody was actually physically like switching CDs out, and it's the first time I remember realizing that adults had like an inner life because I the person would turn down the CD, like
Hmm.
physically turn the knob down for a dick. So it would play, I'm addicted to you. But all of us 10 and 11-year-olds screamed dick at the top of our lungs, of
Uh-huh.
course. And I remember turning to the side and seeing all of the teachers and the principal laughing and like pretending to ignore us, clearly like let them have their fun. And I was like,
Hmm.
whoa, adults can just know we're doing something wrong, but let it happen. And then I remember somewhere around that age, it was an Eminem album. I was on a Girl Guides or a Pathfinders camping trip,
Hmm.
and the leader had bought a censored, like a totally censored Eminem CD. I don't remember which one. And of course, a group, like a car full of 11-year-old girls, screamed every single swear word. And she was just like white knuckled on the wheel, knowing there wasn't a lot she could do. Um, and then third, when I was maybe 13, sitting in the car with my dad and I'm Not Okay by My Chemical Romance playing,
Hmm.
the censored version, the original being, I'm not okay, I'm not oh fucking K.
Hmm.
And then the censored version going, I'm not okay, I'm really not okay. And I remember calmly, I felt so adult in this moment, turning to my dad and being like, did you know that's actually a censored version? In the original, they say the F word. And I like said it, and
Mm.
he was like, oh, okay. But I remember feeling that that was a very adult conversation to have, that I could turn to my dad and be like, this has a swear word in it. Did you
Mhm.
know? Yeah.
Yes, it's really funny. And oh, just so you know, profanity is 110% allowed on this show. I don't think Trend Radio has any objection towards it.
Okay.
In fact, I think I've pre-recorded a show that I'm going to publish next week, as of the time of this recording, it means the 29th of January, so next Friday.
Mhm.
So I've added in my music selection to be William Shatner performing the song by CeeLo Green.
Oh my God, that sounds incredible.
And I remember liking that song a lot simply because it has "fuck you" in the chorus.
Yeah, it felt like a really big deal.
Hmm.
Um, that's a pretty great song.
Oh yeah, it is.
Mhm.
Um, and what about movies? Do you remember like the first movies that you've seen that has swear words in them? Because I think I remember more like after like maybe 1 or 2 years after getting to know Eminem, I was introduced to the comedy movies of Judd Apatow. If you don't know who he is, he's
Sure,
yeah.
totally.
And one of them, I think there were two films that came to mind. One is Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and the other is Superbad.
Right. Yep.
And that, I think, I think my mind was completely blown back then because previously I've only seen films where, people use more polite language. I say, mostly from the Disney Channel. I think I grew
Mhm.
up watching a lot of Hannah Montana and Wizards of Waverly Place.
That sounds right. Yeah, they don't do a lot of cursing in those. I mean, maybe Wizards of Waverly Place literally curse, but I don't think they use the language.
Hmm.
I That same Pathfinder leader, I feel so bad for her as an adult because she just really didn't have control of this group of like 11, 12-year-old girls. We were just little tyrants. But also she didn't, like, I think in retrospect, do the most to like double check all of the media that she was exposing us to. Like I saw there was a movie called The Girl Next Door,
Right.
which I think I saw in theaters with that group, which was not age appropriate at all. And
Hmm.
we also, at a Pathfinder sleepover, watched Coyote Ugly, which again, I wouldn't necessarily say is for 11-year-olds.
Hmm.
And I don't know if for sure they swear in those movies, but it wouldn't shock me that that it came down somewhere in there. Would make a lot of sense, or at least another movie that she somehow accidentally let us watch.
And just as an aside, if you can remember the film Snakes on a Plane, starring Samuel L. Jackson, and there's this famous line when he says, "Enough is enough. I've had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane." And sort of like there was an airplane edit, as in like those edits that they make for in-flight movies, and the line was altered to "Enough is enough. I've had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane."
You really tried something there.
Hmm.
It's I kind of admire the effort to just craft something completely new in the structure of the original line. But I don't know if they hit the mark, but A for effort for sure.
And of course, going back to hip hop, there's that very tricky word that you have to navigate through, and well, I'll give you a hint. It has five letters, or sometimes six, and it starts with the N. And uh, I recently I listened to I re-listened to the Kanye West and Jay Z song, "That Word in Paris,"
Right.
and I remember like this listening to hip hop artists like reciting that word a lot, and of course I use the magic of the internet to know what it is, and of course today in I guess North American society it's still like a very much a taboo thing to even utter the word, but I think when I was living in Hanoi, Vietnam, where I was born and raised, uh, I think it wasn't much of a problem. Like, I think you can utter the word without carrying any racial connotation to it. It's just a word that rappers use. So, well, there's that.
Right. I don't know. I wouldn't really feel qualified to speak
Hmm.
on the history or the implications of that here in any other
Hmm.
culture.
Okay, yeah. So, bit of a change of topic. So, I think we've discussed it via text, but why the name people you meet outside of bars? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So I when I first had a musical project that was just mine, uh, I went by the name Duckies Are the Best Animal. I started it like this YouTube channel, when I was 17 or something, and I was
Hmm.
just this quirky quirky musician playing kind of cuter songs. And then as my music got sort of more and more intense and emotional,
Hmm.
I was like, this name is ludicrous. I got to switch it up. um and I went with people you meet outside of bars because I was very enamored with like the connections I would make when I would go out for a cigarette with
Hmm.
people, where I would meet, I'd go out for a smoke and I'd meet a bunch of strangers. And that was often sort of like the most fun part of a night at a bar or a party, was connecting with people, like these people you meet outside of bars, and the like interesting, weird, deep, really fast friendships that you make when you're uh, kind of drunk and having a cigarette. Um, and I think that I don't I it was long enough ago that I don't even know exactly how I narrowed it down to that, but there's a
Hmm.
couple of things about it that were appealing to me. It was that, and a lot of my music has to do with is like that sort of weird deep conversation that you accidentally fall into during a night out.
Hmm.
And I also really liked that it was a band name that very much implied that there are multiple people in the band, and then it's just
Right.
me. And
Huh.
so I really like being able to introduce myself at a show with, "Hi, we're people you meet outside of bars, and I'm Satah Cameron, and I'm the only one on the
Mhm.
stage," is very funny to me. So it's just like a little joke with myself.
Yeah. So again, duckies are the best animals. Is that it?
Yep. Yep.
Well,
Duckies are the
they.
best animal, also known as, the short form was Datba.
Yeah.
And the YouTube channel that I have, that is now sadly entirely privated
Mhm.
because it was a bunch of weird songs that I did when I was 17, was Datba Faux Show. Like, yeah, Datba for sure. Um, and I look on that fondly, but I think People You Meet Outside of Bars is slightly better, though. Yeah, it is a little strange and vague, but in a way that I think a lot of band names are.
Mhm. Yeah. What are the examples? What are the examples you can think of bands that sound like vague?
Oh, I mean, I think that that's most band names, like that they are not necessarily, unless they're somebody's name, they very rarely actually describe sort of what the band is, or even sort of sum up the ethos of the band,
Hmm.
which I think is kind of fun. And I think is especially fun given that a lot of people like to play games where, if somebody says an interesting phrase, somebody will say, oh, that's a band name, or that's an album title or something like that. So there's clearly some sort of like signifier that like triggers in the human brain of like, oh, that'd be a band name,
Hmm.
but I don't know what it is. I don't know what the connective tissue is, other than it's just like, that's an interesting phrase.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I remember there are these series of films by the a director from Finland called Aki Kaurismäki, and it's about the band called Leningrad Cowboys. And I think one of the more well-known ones is called Leningrad Cowboys to America. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah. Apparently, they're the Soviet, like, fictional rock band that toured around America, which I think brings me to this wonderful film. This is Spinal Tap. I wonder if you've seen it. It's
Totally.
obviously more popular.
Not in a really long time. I think I probably watched it when I was a young teenager.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Did you remember liking it?
Yeah, totally. I think that it was probably one of the first times I remember being exposed to satire,
Hmm.
and really like recognizing it as satire. And I think that was very appealing to me.
Hmm. Yeah. I think I used to write for Trent's Arthur newspaper. Like I used to send them articles and stuff. And one of the first articles I've sent them, which they published, which was a while back, it's a review, a very short review of this film. This is Spinal Tap. I just wrote down what I thought of it. And yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a while, but I distinctively remember that scene where they the band tried to go on stage, but then they got lost in a maze of hallways and corridors.
Oh, right. Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
I really only remember the iconic like turn to 11 scene. I
yes.
bet that if I watched it again,
Hmm.
I would sort of remember the whole thing. But
Right, and there's also the Stonehenge scene as well.
oh yes, right. Yeah, I remember that, and that there was I think it was a oh, Jack Black's band.
Right, Tenacious D. Eh? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they had a comedy special that aired pretty frequently when I was growing up that also
Hmm.
had sort of a Stonehenge
Hmm.
situation in it. And so I think I kind of conflate them with
Hmm.
just there's a couple comedy specials that would air a lot when I was a kid,
Hmm.
uh, that are just burned into my brain because I saw them so many times.
Yeah. So at the time when you were going by, was it ducks are the best animals?
Mhm.
Was MySpace around back then?
I think it I think it still was. I
Hmm.
think that I probably, so I never really used MySpace, but there was a brief period of time where it was sort of like the hub for indie musicians.
Hmm.
And so I bet that if I had a MySpace, it was still the Duckies Are the Best Animal era.
Hmm.
And, if that music was still around, I bet that I could go back and find a recording or two on MySpace for that.
Hmm. And I think around the time when you switched to people you meet outside of bars, which is your current incarnation, were there any particular artists and bands that inspire you to change the musical direction?
It's interesting when I think about it because I don't think I changed. I think that I was making the same music that I'd always been, but I just sort of like I think I was a little less I got a little less quirky, I think, and a little
Mhm.
more well, uh intense. So I think the music didn't change, but I just realized that I had to like sort of rebrand it so that it fit a little bit better for what I thought that I was doing.
Let's see. Yeah. So before we start this conversation, I managed to listen to one or two of your songs.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I mean I'm not one to label people, um but I think a bedroom pop would be a fitting description.
Bedroom pop?
Hmm.
Oh, I would love to claim that as a label. I've never really known how to describe my music. I always just say sort of, vague singer-songwritery, lots of feelings, piano
Hmm.
ukulele situation, which
Hmm.
is not actually a genre. It's just a
Hmm.
long collection of words.
Hmm.
But I do very much literally record a lot of music in my bedroom. So I
Hmm.
think that it fits psychically and literally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty apt, I guess, kind of music, given that we all pretty much trapped inside our bedrooms
Mhm.
during this day and age. And so how's lockdown been for you?
Oh, awful.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
It's, I live alone
Hmm.
and that's hard. Just being literally like completely isolated from other people.
Hmm.
Yeah, I had to like put a lot of work into sort of creating a life that I thought was really worth living and enjoyable.
Hmm.
And then, unfortunately, a lot of the things that I had put work into and a lot of the supports I'd built, it turns out were based around uh, things that lockdown doesn't allow, like
Oh,
live music
oh
and,
yes, that's the
writing in
case.
cafes and being able
Hmm.
to run into people on the street and hang out
Oh
with them.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So it's been really bad and just sort of knuckling like white knuckle trying to get through the rest of the winter when
Hmm.
things warm up and at least I can see people outside again.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, I remember particularly the holidays were really bad, and I remember the first time when the lockdown was announced, which was like March of last year. Well, can you believe that?
It started on my birthday.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, and it's quite a harrowing thing to go through, I say. And I believe that one of the reasons why people are so intense these days is because they are forced to be inside of their houses.
I
And
think that makes a lot of sense. It's people are really forced to live in their own heads more
mhm,
than before, I think. And so it comes down to like, what else do I have to talk about except what's been going on inside my head? Because that's
mhm.
really the only stimulation that I get right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of well, currently a lot of reading. And basically, I try to do things in order to not get into that, not get into the situation where all I have are juggling these thoughts in my head, which can be very, very. It's a lot like static in a way, or it's kind of like those situations where multiple TVs are being turned on and each one of them is playing a different channel. It's
Right.
like that scene in Watchmen.
Mhm.
You know that movie?
Yeah, totally.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's funny because the aesthetics of your music, upon first glance, at least from my experience, is rather comforting. But then when you listen to the lyrics, it's quite unnerving. So yeah, do tell me more about that.
Yeah, one of the reasons I was so delighted to hear you describe me as bedroom pop is because I love pop music.
Hmm.
Um, I've always, I've said a few times that I only make the music I make because it's what I know how to make. And if I could be writing like pop bangers instead, I absolutely would.
Hmm.
I would love to write music that makes people like dance and everything, but the pop music that I really love is the ones that, it makes you dance, but also the lyrics are really sad or really intense. Um, and I think that's just partially how I express myself day to day anyway.
Hmm.
Like when you asked me how lockdown was, I smiled and laughed and said, "Oh, it's been awful." Like, like it's kind of just the way that I talk through things. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism or if it's just to try and make other people comfortable while still being honest,
Hmm.
but that's just sort of the way that things unfold for me. And I had a friend a few years ago send me, there was a sort of a meme going around that was like a picture of a very bright children's play structure right beside a graveyard
Oh
that was
wow.
like, music over the playground and then lyrics over the graveyard. And I had a friend send that to me that was like, "Which band is this? This is you." And I was like, "Yeah."
um yeah, it's quite funny, isn't it? Like I think that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy like dark humor.
Mm,
um for example, I think the plays of Anton Chekhov, or the short stories of Anton Chekhov, the famous Russian playwright and, well, short story writer. He, from what I've read from him, he depicts these people who live, who do not have the best lives, but from a spectator's standpoint, it's very funny how they keep running into the same problems. But if you are, say, one of the characters, then you must feel completely miserable. As in, like,
right.
you constantly run into these obstacles, whether you need to find like love or personal fulfillment, or even just overall life satisfaction. And it borders in onto the absurd. And yeah, and I wonder, do you read a lot of books?
I'm trying to get back to it. I read a
Hmm.
lot as a kid and as a teenager. And then at some point my attention span just got too short. And I'm really bad at sitting down and focusing on one thing at a time. I'm the person who will like play a video game while watching TV, or I will have a podcast and something else going on at all times. I'm not very good at just seeking out one form of stimulation and like focusing on it. um, I'm trying to get back into it. I was actually really hoping that lockdown, way back in March, I was like, "Oh, this will be a great reason to focus on these kind of things."
No, and it turned
But
out not to be
no,
the case.
the opposite.
Hmm.
I would be like TV show and podcast somehow. Can I do both? I couldn't. Um, I I've set a lot of lofty goals of trying to get better at reading, and I've just realized that I have a really bad habit of trying to force myself to do things like all or nothing.
Hmm.
Like I'll be like, I have to read, two books every week, and then I fail at that, and then I decide, oh, I'm not going to read for 3 months. But that doesn't have to be that way. I can just read a book, but I'm not good at actually teaching myself that lesson.
Oh yeah. I think I've had, I set myself quite a lot of objectives when, not just before, not just during lockdown, but even when my school year started. Like but of course I didn't really achieve much of them. But there are a few, like there are a few certain key projects, I guess, that I think I'm quite proud of. I think this podcast is one of them. It started as a radio show where I go into the Trend Radio building and record it live, where I talk about an album that I really like. And then after a while, I just thought, why not just talk to other people about their experience with music. Yeah, and it's something that has been going really well since.
That's great.
Aside from obviously consistently showing up to therapy.
That's always a good goal.
Yeah. One thing we have in common is that we are both cat owners. But
Mm.
unlike you, my cat is very much far from where I'm living right now. Her name is Sushi, and she lives in Hanoi, Vietnam.
Yeah.
And if you do have do need a reason to, you know, sit in one place for a long period of time, then a cat would be a pretty good, way to do it because she sits on your lap, and yeah, the cat would sit on your lap and all that.
Yeah, that's pretty great. My cat is a really strange beast.
Hmm.
He likes to get in the way more than he likes to actually sit.
Hmm.
I've been trying to stretch more, just because my body is falling apart, and it's I'm trying to be a little bit better to it. But he just gets excited whenever I'm stretching because I'm now on the floor and accessible to him. And so I'll be trying to, stretch or use a foam roller to work out some of the rocks in my muscles, and he'll just come over and start purring and yelling and chewing on my hair, and it's not like super helpful and motivating, but I know that he's just trying to have a good time, so I can't be that mad at him.
I wonder, does your cat like the same music that you do?
Oh, you know, yes and no. I think most of the stuff I like he just kind of ignores, but then some of the weirder stuff that I
Hmm.
listen to, when I listen to more experimental things, sometimes he really looks around like there's an emergency. There's some stuff that I think I have to listen to with headphones because he doesn't seem to quite understand it. But my favorite interaction with him for music is that he'll often come over and start meowing when I'm singing. Um, and I think it's because he just thinks that I'm talking to him. He'll come. I'll be kind of quiet all day. Maybe just talk to him a couple times, and then I'll get out my guitar or something, and I'll be singing, and he'll come over and be so happy and chirping at
Oh.
me and yelling, which is very very sweet, but so annoying if I'm trying to record
Mhm.
something. I probably have more outtakes than any other kind of outtake, even like mistakes or whatever, are just me going, Geralt, come on. No, not right now.
Is it a Geralt? As in the lead singer of My Chemical Romance? Is that it?
No. Gerald, so when he was a street cat that followed my friend's little brother home from a party.
Hmm.
Um and they adopted him, and when I moved into my first apartment in 2014, they brought him over the next day and they were like, here's a cat, and I was like, thank you. And he was named Gary at the time,
Oh.
after the snail from SpongeBob.
Gary, come home.
That's yeah, and I just like I didn't quite love the human name for him, and so I thought if Harry is short for Harold,
Mm.
Gary can be short for Gerald.
Oh,
And
right.
so I just decided to call him Gerald.
Right. Right.
I
It's like,
love food names, food as pet names, though. Sushi's a great one.
mhm. Yeah, my mom named her that.
Mhm.
And it's funny, like Ken is short for Kenjamin, kind of like that, isn't it?
Yes. I love that's one of my favorite jokes. I think probably my friends with like one syllable names get really bored of it, but it's funny to me almost every time.
Yeah. So we've solved that mystery.
Mhm.
So I wonder, do you spend more time these days making music or listening to other people's music?
Honestly, neither.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been a really strange time. I was really hoping um, that I would be able to like get some cool stuff done. Last year was actually the first year in quite a while that I didn't put out an album or an EP. In 2016, I put out 12 EPs
Oh
because
wow.
I decided to do one every month.
Hmm?
And then I've released at least one album or EP every year since.
Mm-hmm.
Last year I put out a few songs of my like I have an experimental like electronic poetry side project called
Oh
Piloting
wow.
the Animal.
Oh wow.
I put out a few tracks for that, but it was the first time that I haven't put out a People You Meet Outside of Bars album, which was really disappointing. And I'm trying to be, reasonable with my expectations of myself during a pandemic. But it's really frustrating to know that I had so much time and that wasn't the way that I could put my time towards it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting more into listening to music again now, but the thing is, I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts. I listen to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of podcasts.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, and so that takes up a lot of my sort of like auditory time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I know that those things feed into each other, and if I want to be more proficient in my output, more prolific in my output, I should be listening to more music because
Mm-hmm.
that is important for your creative brain to absorb things as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think part of it is that I podcasts occupy my brain a lot more because I have to actually really, really pay attention to
Mm-hmm.
them. Whereas with music, I think that I let my mind wander a little bit more. And just with the stress of everything right now, I don't really want my mind to wander. I kind of want
Mm-hmm.
it to be occupied.
Of
So
course, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, what are the podcasts you're listening to right now?
Well, there are quite a few. I listen to a lot of like actual play tabletop role playing
Mm-hmm.
podcasts. People playing D&D or people playing.
Right.
What I prefer is people playing games that are not D&D. Um, uh, there's a podcast called One Shot where
Mm-hmm.
they basically play a series of just independent sort of differently mechanical tabletop role playing games with like a
Mm-hmm.
series of different guests that I listen to a lot of. And there's a podcast called Friends at the Table that I've been listening to for a few years where they do these grand arcing stories, also in like different role playing systems. I'm really into like TRPGs as
Mm-hmm.
a general thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying to get more into like writing and creating my own games and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where a lot of my creative input and output is right now, is like trying to like absorb different mechanics that are like new to me and that are
Mm-hmm.
unfamiliar and that are really cool, so that I can like figure out what the type of thing that I want to make
Mm-hmm.
is. Yeah, a lot of those, and then some comedy podcasts. But
Of course. Yeah.
yeah, I don't listen to a lot of uh, real life informational podcasts that you can actually really learn from.
Right.
I'm not sure why that is, except that I've never been somebody who like reads nonfiction or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. Um, so a lot of narrative stuff and some comedy stuff and a lot of nerdy tabletop
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Yeah. I get recommended the Welcome to Night Vale one a lot. I haven't really checked it
I
out.
It's wonderful. So I started listening to Welcome to Night Vale when it was just starting to get really popular in like 2012, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened, you know, every week for quite a while, and then I dropped off of it. I actually went to go see, they did a live show in
Oh wow.
Ottawa
Oh, that's cool.
years ago, and I went and I dressed up as one of the characters, and one of the creators took a picture of me because he said he'd never seen anybody dress up as that character before. So that was a huge deal
Mm-hmm.
for me. And then I stopped listening for quite a few years. And last year, I think I went back and I started listening again from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that's so nostalgic for me that I felt myself like physically go back. That when
Mm-hmm.
you listen to something or you experience something and you feel like you shift out of time, almost like it
Mm-hmm.
feels like you're back in another time when you first experienced it.
Oh yeah.
Um, which was really wonderful in a way. And it really is a good show. I think that people have sort of moved past it because it's been so long. I'm sure it's still very popular, but it was one of the first really big narrative podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it holds up. I think it's great.
Oh yeah. I think I really should listen to it at some point.
Mhm.
Well, given all the time that I have, but
Mhm.
I think you described that feeling of a bit of a nostalgic escapism, and it's a wonderful feeling to have, and I think the last time that ever happened to me was when I decided to play as in not as in play instrumentally, but as in play from my phone, the My Bloody Valentine album, Loveless.
Sure. Yeah.
It's it's a really wonderful piece of music, and I think it took like 2 or so years to make, and it sort of like bankrupted their label, Creation Records, because it was so long and it was so expensive. But the result is that it changed music for good. So it there's this like wall of like loud and distorted sonic texture, but then the lyrics are incredibly soft and sweet.
Right.
And I don't know. It's one of those. It's one of those albums where, of course, you cannot really make that within a bedroom, but it's a really good piece of, say, bedtime music, as they say. And yeah, and I listened to their latest record, which was released in 2013, called MBV, which is also incredible.
Yeah, I'm only really passingly familiar with their music. I've enjoyed what I've heard, but I've never done a particularly deep dive. And
Mhm.
I've always sort of had the sense that I should, I think especially hearing you talk about it like that, I think I would probably really enjoy it. It's just one of those things that I've just it goes on the list and then other things go on top of it on the
Oh yeah,
list.
it's the same with me. I think I have like a bunch of stuff queued, like books and movies and music, and I mean, I mean, I have quite a bit of time, but I'm very busy with a lot of things, so therefore haven't get a chance to check them out. But yeah, I do appreciate that feeling when you return to a piece of text or art that resonated with you when you were a kid, and you found out that they still have that much resonance with you as an adult. You know, so yeah, I think REM is another example of that. I used to listen to them a lot when I
Oh
was
yeah.
back in high school. Um, I think one of the first episode of the podcast version, at least, was me talking about their 1992 album "Automatic for the People," which
Right.
has some really, really good songs, including "Everybody Hurts," which was a very cheerful ballad. And
I love that song. It's one of those ones that just gets me.
Mhm. Yeah. Then can you tell me about other things that triggered your like this nostalgic escapism that you have?
Sure, I have, I kind of mentioned it at the beginning, like my dad's CDs that I would
Hmm.
listen to. There's some specific ones. Had a best of Queen
Oh, cool.
compilation.
Hmm.
So any songs off of that will get me. I'm a big fan of musicals, and a lot of people who are really hardcore about musicals will scoff at me for this opinion, but I love Andrew Lloyd Webber. I can't help it. I And part of that is because I had again a best of Andrew Lloyd Webber,
Hmm.
and so hearing specific recordings,
Hmm.
um, you know, of from specific and anything that was on that, whatever casts were on
Hmm.
the were singing those ones, they'll get me. And also, there are like 3 Supertramp albums
Oh
that
wow.
will send me like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
I've recently remembered, I had a cassette of Tracy Chapman's self-titled album
Oh
that I
yeah.
would listen to a lot as a
Right.
child, which is very funny.
Talk about revolution. Yeah.
Yep, yeah, and it had Fast Car on it, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
and I would listen to that and the Cat soundtrack. Those were my two
Hmm.
most played cassettes. It's very funny to think of like little 7-year-old me being like, "Yeah, Fast Car." I get it. I get it. I don't know what I was like so attracted to in. I mean, it's incredible music, obviously, but I don't know how child me was connecting emotionally with the concepts, but apparently they were because I loved that cassette.
So, what are your thoughts on the latest cinematic adaptation of the Cats musical?
Okay, so I love it for what because it knows exactly what it is.
Wow.
I'm not saying that it's a good movie.
Hmm.
Like I think it's pretty objectively awful, but I love it because it is not pretending to be anything except what it is,
Mhm.
which I admire wholeheartedly. And I love Cats the musical. I understand that it's absurd and it makes no sense. And I have frequently watched there was a 1998 release of a professionally shot, they filmed the stage show
Hmm.
and put it out. So I've watched that a lot, and I wouldn't have made some of the changes that they made for the 2019 movie when it comes to choices they made for characters and to change a couple of the songs up. But I wouldn't have made a lot of the decisions that they made, and that's what's so special about it is that they made every decision that they made, and they committed to it 100%. I think that I felt every single human emotion that you can feel while
Mhm.
watching Cats, and I literally skipped out of the theater. I was so happy with how just balls to the wall, like foot all the way down. They took the brakes off of the car
Mhm.
completely. And
Wow.
you know, I admire that.
Mhm. Wow, I think that's the first actually that someone actually had a positive experience watching Cats 2019.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so we are nearing the end of our time now, as my therapist would say. So anything you'd like to say to close off the interview, the conversation, Satah Cameron,
Oh,
aka
jeez.
people you meet outside of bars?
I don't think so particularly. Thanks for having me. Thanks for speaking with me. This was really fun.
Hmm.
Um, I guess just to call back to how the lockdown sucks, if you're listening to this, be gentle with yourself and try to take care, try to do something nice for you, especially something practical and nice like drinking enough water. Maybe take literally like 2 minutes and stretch a little bit. Stand, open a window and stare blankly out of it so that you get a little bit of sun. Um, all of those things. They're important and they're hard to do, even though they shouldn't be. Uh, but try.
All right. With that being
Yeah.
said, thank you very much, Satah.
Thank you.